which leads then to sort of the next question. It's like, well, where do you deploy it? And you forwarded another article, this one from Computer World, talking about the fact that, all the hype aside, AI may in fact not be delivering all this productivity. Now, I will say I question the articles a little bit, the veracity of it, because it cites some pretty cagey sources in here. I mean, for instance, there's this quote. It says, the measured value of generative AI in the workplace so far has been quite mixed at Hyoun Park, CEO and chief analyst of Amalgam Insights. I mean, if they're quoting you, how good of an article can it be, really?
Very true. Very suspect. There are other articles that did cover this story as well, but I understand why we're not believing me, but hopefully we can believe economists Anders Humlum and Emilie Vestergaart, who did look at who surveyed the impact of generative AI. I would add not agentic AI. This is a look at generative AI from last year, and found that at least in Denmark, it had very little impact on wages or job retention. So a lot of talk about how generative AI was going to lead to productivity and changes and all of this, and it didn't actually happen. And I don't think that should be a huge surprise to us, knowing what we know now, that there's an extra layer of alignment that really needs to be in place from a workflow and automation perspective to make generative AI truly useful in the enterprise.
Yeah, no, and I think your points in the article were well taken, and I think that what this speaks to in general is that we're, again, as we've said ad nauseum on this show, we're at the early stages of this, and it's a mix of, I think, an intersection of three things, right? One is that the technology is still very early. It's got some very rough edges. It doesn't always deliver as much as we would hope, and therefore it ends up sort of it's sort of like a gambling at the casino. You get some wins and then you lose some money back to the house, and you maybe come out just a little bit ahead, right? So you have that sort of aspect of it. I think the second aspect is you've got the fact that we're still in the very early stages of even deploying the technology to being able to get that sort of, right? You have to get to a certain economy of scale for this to really have an impact. And the third, and this is probably the most important, is that in the end, I don't think we're ever going to see these breakthrough numbers, transformationally, until we start redesigning work around these AI-empowered workflows. And so that's, honestly, I don't know if I know any organization that's really in earnest doing any of that, right? There's still a lot of experimentation going on. So, I neither found, and I think this was sort of your point when, in the quote you gave, I neither found this surprising, nor did I find it horribly disquieting, right? I mean, I found it not to be unexpected, and I think this is a pretty normal sort of stage of where we're at. The one thing I would take from it, though, is that if you are a CIO, if you're selling this internally, you need to moderate the hype. You need to moderate the expectations as to what is really going to happen and what we can realistically expect from the technology to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think this eliminates the potential for AI to be more productive in the future, but I think it's interesting how we're starting to realize how there's a sandwich of capabilities, or like multiple layers of capabilities necessary to translate AI into true productivity. Because you've got the model layer itself, you need some sort of business context layer in the middle, and then you've got these outputs that also still need to be shaped and guided to some extent. So it's not simply a matter of I put stuff in the model and the model's so smart that it gives me something fantastic in return, no matter how big and how smart the model is.
Well, and we didn't pick it up. I mean, I think this has been happening the last couple of weeks, but we had in recent weeks, we had both Shopify and Duolingo made separate announcements about either not hiring new workers. I think Duolingo was not hiring any contractors until you could prove that AI couldn't do the work. And I struggle with these announcements because it's like there's not a single AI tool that I've seen that is capable of completely replacing an entire human-driven workflow, period, where I could just like, oh, I'm not going to hire Joe the contractor. I'm going to bring this AI in. I'm going to ask it to do everything else. But literally, nothing can do that today. So I don't understand, other than gets them in the news. I don't really understand what they're hoping to accomplish. And it's either they're just delirious on the hype, or they're just being cynical and making these grandiose statements, knowing that they are not achievable. I'm not
Yeah.
sure which, but
Right? Like I see these announcements by, say, Satya Nadella or Mark Zuckerberg saying 20 or 30% of our code is now written by AI. And I'm thinking either you don't understand what's going on or you're putting out some pretty substandard code. Like, like I
yeah, it's just
understand
that
that you can get little applets, you can get 20, 30 decent lines of code to do one specific thing from AI because it is copying from Stack Overflow, basically. And I understand that, but you're not going to get an app out of AI. And you're not even going to be able to put it in the right place without a developer to decide where that code goes.
Yeah, well, and I think that is the key thing, is that even if I could get it to give me a full app, what is clearly not existing today is something that's going to take it cradle to grave and actually put it into a deployable state, deploy it into a production environment, and do all the
And
components that are
test
necessary.
and yeah.
Right. Yeah, I may have different AI that can help with different parts of this, but it's not going to be. And this is, we've talked a lot about this idea of agentic management of integration of multiple agents, and this is why all this is important, because eventually that's what happens, right? We're going to have specific agents, one that's really good at the coding, one that's really good at deployment in this scenario, right? And it's this whole host of agents, and then they all have to be orchestrated, and all of that is very complex, and it's super complex when you talk about the fact that that's a high risk workflow, because if it fails, now I'm potentially putting a whole lot of business at risk. And so, that's the challenge with all of the hype around all of this.